So this is a story from ABC News. Washington to pay $1.6 million to settle lawsuits after protests at Trump's 2017 inauguration. The class action suit allege mass arrests and excessive force. They reached a $1.6 million settlement in two suits. The lawsuits were brought by the American Civil Liberties Union of D.C. and attorney Jeffrey Light on behalf of protesters. The ACLU said in a statement Monday that the lawsuit alleged police chief Newsham and more than 20 officers engaged in or supervised constitutional violations, including mass arrests of demonstrators without probable cause, unlawful conditions, and confinement for detainees, and or use of excessive force. And I wonder if y'all can notice anything in this image.
Let's see.
Nobody? I'll just give you a couple seconds.
General lack of testosterone?
Nope, there's me.
Oh, there it is.
You can actually see this is me holding up my press pass and my phone as I'm live streaming what's going on. And if you squint, you can tell that's me from one of the photos that I actually use on YouTube.
That's white dudes for Harris right there.
Yeah.
When they say excessive force, do they mean like blind firing into a crowd and shooting a woman in the neck, or beating someone to death on the Capitol stairs? What is excessive force in this case?
They mean that they surrounded them and made them stand there for 3 hours.
Oh, that's excessive force.
I mean, geez, some people were hungry.
I'll note that the ACLU has never reached out to me to, defend me as for my First Amendment.
Well, you may notice
violated.
Yeah.
You may notice in this photo as well these green hats that you'll see all over the place. At the time when I was covering protests, what I was told of these individuals with green hats, they're the National Lawyers Guild, is that they're there to observe police behavior and protester behavior to provide constitutional defenses for protesters. And I said, oh, well, that's cool, I guess. So you're volunteers and you're lawyers, and yeah. And then we watch, and if the police act a fool, and I'm like, I like that, to check on government. You know what I mean? And then one day I was in Boston, and there was a bunch of right-wing individuals, and on the other side of the park was a bunch of left-wing individuals. The people on the right were holding shields. The people on the left, quite literally the left, were holding crowbars and baseball bats, and the National Lawyers Guild was standing alongside them. And I know most of these people, and so I walked over and I was talking to them, and I was like, yeah, what's going on? And they were like, we're just doing our thing, blah, blah, blah. And I had friends who were over there, and they're like, hey, look, it's Tim, because Tim covers all the protests. And then I said to the National Lawyers Guild, I was like, how come there's no National Lawyers Guild people over there? And they were like, what do you mean? And I said, how come you guys aren't observing the other side? I mean, what if police do something? And they were like, what do you mean? I was like,
even register with them.
No, they're the
bad guys.
Well, and someone told me they're a progressive leftist activist group that masquerade as legal protection. Their purpose actually is just to provide means of, look what they did. These people ran around. No, with all due respect, I can tell you a handful of those people in there, some of them I know, did nothing wrong and should never have been arrested. These people right here who are by me were not smashing anything. There were a bunch of people black clad in hoodies and masks that were smashing things up. You can see I'm filming. There's another guy who's filming. There's 2 or 3 people who are there just filming. And they did wrongly round up a lot of people. That is BS. Okay, but, to stand there and just provide defense for the people who are knowingly organizing to destroy and damage this, and then ignore, what goes on the other side. You are just an activist. You are not legal protection. It is just another mechanism by which they can get away with committing crimes.
They're so organized. They're so good at being evil. It's insane. And going back to kind of the bumbling right versus this organized, calculated evil left. It's just it can be overwhelming to see all that.
See, here's the issue I see with this. Because I can look at this photo and say, I remember that day. And yeah, there's probably a lot of people in that crowd, I would, including the other journalists, who should not have been stopped, who committed no crimes, did nothing wrong, and were wrongfully arrested. The problem is, you can easily separate that. You can say, look, here's a guy wearing a green shirt. He's not a part of the group of people with black masks throwing rocks and bricks and setting fires. Get him out of here. And if they had actually centered on only the people, if the cops were like, if you are part of the group of black mask wearing hoodies, black jeans that we have witnessed committing crimes, you're going to end up arresting 50 to 100 people, not 200 random people. And the fact that they brought journalists into this is probably what helped the far leftists, the writers, get payouts. Yeah. Because then the lawyers will say, look at these journalists. This guy's got a credential with this, magazine. Police screwed up. But, here's the challenge. You're a cop in D.C. There's a gigantic mass of people running through the streets. Many of them are smashing things and starting fires. You can't stop it. What do? Well, they said, screw it. We'll deal with the repercussions later. Arrest everybody. And then you end up letting all the criminals go because you did that. Instead of pulling them out one by one and making the difficult choice of arresting one at a time, which is often what police do. They'll go into the crowd, identify someone, wait, then they reach out, grab them, and pull them to the other side. With this mass arrest, they basically let them get away with it. Now, that being said, on January 6th, there were many people who bumbled in, were regular people who committed no crimes. They got the book thrown at them. Right. These people were the justification for letting the criminals go. That's insane.
One of the guys in our movie, Siaka, he's actually was on Babylon Bee staff. He's done videos for us and stuff like that. He was in one of the doorways for maybe 60 seconds. Didn't even really go all the way in, was kind of in the doorway. The police at one point said, hey, can we clear out this area so people can exit the building? And he, all on video, he turns around and says to the crowd outside, hey guys, clear away so people can get out. And he assisted the police officers, was very friendly, very courteous. And he's the guy that was arrested in front of his pregnant wife on the tarmac, coming back from a Daily Wire movie premiere. The FBI raided his house, confiscated all his cell phones and his laptops. It still hasn't returned. They confiscated his Trump hat, his MAGA hat.
I got to be honest. Like, it really does seem that the only way any of this makes sense is that they wanted members of Congress to get hurt.
This is exactly what they wanted. And look, Siaka is a great example, and there's so many others. The one story that I enjoy, or I hate to even have to tell his story, is, J.D. Rivera, is he was a journalist. He was contracted by an actual mainstream news station in Mobile, Alabama, to go up. He had his full, big professional gear on his shoulder. He went through the same window that Luke Mogelson for The New Yorker went through. They almost paralleled each other through the Capitol. And he was the first guy arrested in Florida. They swatted him and his family, 6:30 in the morning, red dots on his wife and on his children on the porch, 25 agents, minimum of 25 agents. He was not going to plead guilty. He was not going to take a plea deal to something. He was there performing the work of a journalist. You're not arresting Luke Mogelson. You're not arresting the other guys. He was wearing no MAGA stuff. He did commit a crime, though. You know what it was? Before January 6th, he had been an activist with Latinos for Trump.
Wow.
So that was his crime. He goes to trial, does a bench trial. Judge finds him guilty on all 4 of his misdemeanors. Now he's swatted, right, for nonviolent misdemeanors as a journalist. 8 months in prison was his sentence.
The only way any of this makes sense,
he was the first one arrested,
is that
in Florida.
That the Democrat leadership and these people were hoping, or at least they expected, that members of Congress would be seriously injured or something would happen, because then if you look at how this all goes down, a SWAT raid for a misdemeanor? That makes no sense. What about a photo of a senator being beaten or something like that happening? Then the SWAT raids are like they're going after the people who assaulted the Capitol and attacked members of.
It's like they had the plan and the narrative already in place, and they said, okay, well, none of this happened, but we're going to go with it anyway.
Yeah, well, I was Nancy Pelosi's daughter there filming a documentary during that day.
What?
Nancy Pelosi's daughter was there filming a documentary that day.
I had no clue.
She actually reached out to me. She wanted me to be in her documentary.
For you didn't know that?
No, I did not know
And on the documentary, Nancy Pelosi says, I take full responsibility for this failure.
I've seen that. That's from the documentary?
Yeah.
Wow.
She says it's my fault and Trump brought it up, and they're like, shut up, Trump, you can't.
She tried to get me in her documentary 3 times. Would not leave my attorneys alone. I told her I would go on, but I want to be with your mom.
See, and that's the other thing that's crazy.
But you're not allowed to ask for money or anything.
I'm immersed in the news. I live this stuff day in and day out. I'm hearing stuff just in this podcast that is news to me as a right-wing guy who's always in the news. I mean, normies aren't hearing any of this.
Right.
None of this is getting out.
As part of the terms of your, I guess, were you convicted or you took a plea, or how did?
I took a plea deal. We got the felony dropped and the violent entry dropped because I walked through open doors. Not sure that's violent entry. And I settled with a glorified trespassing. It's the misdemeanor.
So part of this is that you can't profit in any way off of.
I have 2 years left, so anytime I go to these podcasts or hang out with you guys, it's all on my dollar by dime. But having fun doing it.
So in the instance of being asked to be in the documentary, would you be allowed to say to her, in 2 years, I will do it if you pay me X amount of dollars? Or you can't even ask her the money now for advance, right?
No. Her documentary did finish. That was released, I think, about a year ago.
Yeah.
About a year ago, but it's exactly what I thought it was going to be. She didn't paint anyone in a good light.
She was filming a documentary in the Capitol. What was the original intent of the documentary?
That's a great question.
All right, I have to take off the tinfoil hat and explain that January 6th is a constitutional day. Every 4 years, it is a significant day on our constitutional calendar. So the fact that there was going to be the certification of electoral college vote
Fair
that
point.
day, I mean, there were over 100 journalists invited to be there that day that were already inside the building. Photojournalists
And Trump had been contesting the election. There had been many
That's
lawsuits,
correct.
and they knew that there were states sending alternate electors.
That's correct. So there were other items of interest going on, but back to your point, Tim, is that there was a plan that did not happen that day. There was a plan for things to happen that did not transpire in the manner in which they believed. And I say this all the time, and I go on the record on a regular basis. One of my dead man switches is that I tell certain things that we're working on podcasts, and I tell them on TV shows, I tell them in interviews, is because I think that when we finally settle this thing conclusively, you're going to find out that this plan was hatched in the DOD. It did not come out of the mind of Pelosi.
You said you were taking off your tinfoil hat.
What's that?
You said you were taking off your tinfoil.
Oh no, I'm putting. No, this is not tinfoil.
You're like layers
This is not
deep
the
now.
tinfoil. I'm telling you what happened that day. I'm telling you that this was hatched in Mark Milley's office, and that this was why the National Guard was turned down, because those three generals who turned down the National Guard and said they didn't for the reasons of optics, they were answering for Milley, who was not on that call at the time, and the Secretary of the Army was also mysteriously gone that day. And then in addition to that, you're going to learn that because our special forces are so skilled in color revolution techniques, and I'll give you an exact quote from a 3-star general, former second in command of SOCOM, to me. He said, all I would need is 4 or 5 of my best guys to make January 6th happen.